Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the show, all about solar, off-grid energy, and making the most out of your renewable setups. I'm really excited for today's episode because we're going to dive into a comparison between two popular inverters, the Solis S6-11.4K and the Sandi 10K. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I want to share a quick personal story that totally opened my eyes to how critical the right inverter can be. Years ago, I helped install an off-grid setup for my uncle, who lives on a farm with an interesting mix of power needs: a deep well pump, a chest freezer, and even some workshop tools like a drill press and a metal lathe that could draw heavy loads on startup. One morning, a neighbor showed up with an old air compressor he needed to test because it wouldn't run on his smaller solar system. We plugged it in, and let's just say our inverter at the time was not happy. Lights flickered, the inverter shut down, and we spent the rest of the day troubleshooting the surge demands we totally underestimated. After that fiasco, I realized how important it is to pick an inverter that doesn't just meet the spec sheet, but also handles those unexpected moments, like your neighbor's compressor or a sudden pump cycling on. And that's exactly why I'm so passionate about understanding the real-world differences between high-frequency inverters like the Solis S6 and low-frequency workhorses like the Sandi SDP 10 kilowatt, both high-voltage inverters. So, in this episode, we're covering why you might choose one inverter topology over the other, the strengths and weaknesses of each, and how to figure out which is the right fit for your system, especially if you're juggling unpredictable loads like we did. Stick around, because if you're serious about reliable solar power, you'll want to hear about everything from surge capabilities to installation tips to real-life performance. Let's jump right in. Welcome to Section 2 of our Solar Inverter Deep Dive. Now that we've set the stage, let's get into the nuts and bolts, specifically high frequency, HF, versus low frequency, LF, inverter topologies, and how that difference impacts features like built-in chargers and grid tie. High-frequency inverters operate using faster switching, often tens of kilohertz, enabling them to use lighter, more compact components. An example is the Solis S6-11.4K, more compact and lightweight. Thanks to high-frequency switching, the transformer is either much smaller or replaced by electronic circuitry, high efficiency, and modern features. HF inverters typically boast excellent conversion efficiency, plus built-in battery charging functionality. The Solis S6 goes a step further, offering grid tie capability and compatibility with a wide variety of battery chemistries, lithium-ion, for instance, right out of the box. Versatility. If you want to feed power back to the grid and take advantage of net metering, HF inverters like the Solis S6 can handle that seamlessly. They integrate well into most modern solar plus storage systems. Of course, some HF inverters can be a bit more sensitive to massive load surges, but for normal household use, especially where you plan to connect to the grid or manage a battery bank, HF inverters often shine. Low-frequency inverters rely on big, heavy iron core transformers operating at your standard grid frequency, 60 Hz in many regions. A classic example is the Sandi 10K. LF inverters have a reputation for handling large inductive loads, things like well pumps, heavy workshop tools, or anything needing a serious startup current. They're often praised as being more bulletproof in tough conditions, but that bulky transformer makes them physically large and heavy. No built-in battery charger and no grid tie. Unlike the Solis S6, the Sandi 10K doesn't have an onboard battery charger and isn't designed for grid feedback. This means if you want to charge batteries from AC or integrate seamlessly with a utility grid, you'll need extra hardware or a completely different approach. In other words, if you're purely off-grid with no interest in selling power back, LF might suffice. But for any grid interactive scenario, you'd be out of luck with the Sandi. So HF usually means lighter weight, higher efficiency, and advanced features like built-in battery charging and grid tie. That's exactly what you get with something like the Solis S6. Meanwhile, LF is a beast at handling surges and often revered for off-grid toughness. But the Sandi 10K's design doesn't allow for grid tie or a built-in charger, and that's important to know before you buy. Next up, we'll see how all this translates into real-world strengths and weaknesses. Stay tuned for Section 3, where we examine how these topologies perform under the pressures of actual day-to-day solar use. Welcome back. We've explored the high-level differences between high-frequency, HF, and low-frequency, LF, inverters. But how does that translate to real-world usage? And what does it mean that the Solis S6-11.4K has 4 built-in MPPT ports? Let's take a look at some scenarios that highlight these practical considerations and help you narrow down which inverter suits your needs. Picture a cabin or homestead off the utility grid. You need an inverter that can handle daily essentials: lights, fridge, pumps, power tools, etc. Traditionally, folks lean on LF inverters like the Sandi 10K for robust reliability off-grid. But remember, the Sandi 10K doesn't include a built-in charger or advanced monitoring, so you'll need external hardware if you plan to charge batteries from sources like solar or a generator. By contrast, the Solis S6-11.4K comes with a built-in battery charger and multiple MPPTs, 4 in fact. This is huge if you have multiple solar array sections, some panels facing east, some facing west. You can wire them separately, each tracked for optimal production. If you think you might add more panels or reconfigure your arrays later, 4 MPPT ports give you enormous flexibility in hooking up multiple strings at different orientations or shade patterns. For a purely off-grid site with minimal expansion plans, Sandi's simpler approach will work very well. But if you want that flexibility, especially for multi-string solar arrays, Solis's built-in MPPT advantage is huge. Now imagine you live in a typical neighborhood and can feed energy to the grid when you produce surplus power. Here's how each inverter stacks up. The Solis S6-11.4K is designed for easy grid interconnection right out of the box. You can seamlessly export power and take advantage of net metering or time-of-use rate structures. It also supports a wide variety of batteries and has that built-in charger. The Sandi 10K does not grid tie and lacks a built-in charger, making it far less convenient for suburban folks who want to interact with the utility. Suburban homes often have partial shading or multiple roof pitches. Having 4 MPPTs on the Solis means each section of your roof can be optimized for maximum generation. Sandi simply isn't designed for that level of onboard solar optimization. You'd need extra external gear. If you anticipate wanting backup power during outages but also want to maximize solar production on a complex rooftop, the Solis S6 is tailor-made for that scenario. A big concern for many people is whether an inverter can handle the short bursts of power needed by heavy startup loads, like pumps, compressors, or air conditioners. Solis S6 Surge Capability. This inverter does offer respectable surge capacity, and with proper sizing, it can handle most household or workshop loads without fuss. Thanks to modern HF design improvements, it's no longer as wide a gap between HF and LF as it used to be. Sandi 10K surge capability. Low-frequency inverters are known for high surge tolerance, and Sandi maintains that reputation. But again, don't dismiss Solis. Especially at 11.4 kilowatts, it has significant headroom for big inductive loads. So, whether you're using a well pump or an air compressor, both inverters can be viable as long as you size them with those surge demands in mind. Beyond power specs, there's also the matter of how easy it is to set up and maintain. Physical footprint and weight. LF inverters like Sandi tend to be heavier, 220 pounds, 100 kilograms. Be sure you have a sturdy wall or floor for mounting. The HF Solis S6 is lighter and typically easier to handle, 72 pounds, 32.5 kilograms, which can be a big deal in tight utility rooms or when mounting at awkward heights. Maintenance and monitoring. Solis has robust remote monitoring options, including data loggers and apps, making it easier to catch issues early or tweak settings. Sandi is simpler overall but requires extra add-ons if you want advanced monitoring. So, if you're 100% off-grid, have minimal solar array complexity, and just want a simple, heavy-duty inverter, the Sandi 10K will fit the bill. If you want an integrated battery charger, multiple MPPTs for diverse panel layouts, and true grid tie capabilities, the Solis S6 11.4K is tough to beat, especially considering how flexible it is for expansions or more complicated rooftops. Plus, the HF design surge capacity is better than many folks realize, so don't assume you have to go LF just for big startup loads. Stick around for Section 4, where we'll compare these two inverters even more directly, looking at daily operational efficiency, user interface, and how each one might fit into your long-term solar plans. Daily operational efficiency. One of the biggest considerations for any inverter is how well it converts DC power to AC throughout the day. Solis S6 11.4K, high conversion efficiency. HF designs often reach higher efficiency, commonly in the mid to high 90% range. This can translate to more of your solar energy actually being used or stored, rather than lost in heat. Low idle consumption. Modern HF inverters also tend to have relatively low standby power draw, important when your panels aren't generating, like overnight. Sandi 10K, strong efficiency at mid-high loads. While LF inverters can still be quite efficient, they may not peak as high as some HF units. Higher no-load loss. The big transformer inside tends to draw more power, even when you're not running a lot of loads, which could matter for smaller battery banks or limited solar arrays. Next up, controlling your inverter and staying on top of performance. Some people love seeing real-time stats on their phone, others just want a basic display. The Solis S6 offers robust remote monitoring and data logging options. You can typically keep tabs on production, battery state, and grid usage from an app or web portal. Menus and LCD screens are often more advanced and user-friendly. Great for set it and track it, especially if you like analyzing daily or monthly performance data. The Sandi has a straightforward LCD display, but less in-depth on integrated monitoring. Some folks enjoy the simplicity, fewer screens, fewer to no software updates. But if you want granular remote tracking, you'll likely need external hardware or data loggers. So if you're a data geek or you value the convenience of checking system status on your phone, Solis is the stronger choice. If you're okay with minimal interface, the Sandi will get the job done, just in a more bare-bones way. Let's talk about battery compatibility and charging. This is a big differentiator, especially if you're building a hybrid or off-grid system. The Solis has a built-in battery charger. It can charge batteries directly from solar or the grid, perfect for load shifting and maximizing solar usage. It has a wide battery compatibility, designed to interface with many lithium-ion battery brands. SmartCom protocols help ensure safe, optimized charging. The Sandi has no onboard charger. You'll need a separate charger if you plan to replenish batteries from a solar, generator, or other source. If you want advanced battery management or the ability to easily add new battery types, you'll be adding external gear. Grid tie versus off-grid. The Solis S6 is fully capable of feeding excess power back to the grid, letting you net meter or offset your utility bill. Perfect for on-grid or hybrid setups with battery backup. Whereas the Sandi 10K is strictly off-grid or standalone usage. No grid tie functionality. If you're never planning to connect to the utility, this might be enough, but if there's any possibility you'll want to sell back, it's not an option. Cost and long-term value. Price points can fluctuate, but generally, Solis S6, you will pay less for more advanced features and integrated design. Sandi 10K is more expensive, plus you need to factor in external battery chargers, external controllers, and the inability to net meter, losing out on potential utility bill savings. The true cost can vary depending on your system goals. As you can see, it really boils down to your application, whether you want grid tie, and how much you value integrated advanced features versus a traditional LF design. So there's our deep dive, feature by feature. If you're someone who wants to feed surplus power back to the grid, mix and match battery brands, and track every watt from your phone, the Solis S6 is probably calling your name. If you're pure off-grid and love a straightforward, rugged approach, especially for big loads, the Sandi is still a great contender. Stay with us because next we'll move into the next section where we'll talk about installation tips, potential pitfalls, and a few final pointers before you make that big inverter purchase. Welcome back for our final segment. We've spent a lot of time dissecting topologies, practical use cases, installation strategies, everything you need to know before making a decision between the Solis S6-11.4K and the Sandi 10K. Let's wrap it all up with some key points to help you make the call. Let's talk about compliance and certification. Solis S6 is UL certified. This means it meets North American safety standards, UL 1741, etc. If you're planning a grid-tied or hybrid system, having a UL-listed inverter simplifies both the inspection process and your utility interconnect approval. Sandi 10K is not UL-listed. It might still perform perfectly well for your off-grid setup, but you should be aware that it isn't certified to the same standard. This can be a factor if local regulations, inspectors, or insurance require a UL-listed device. So if your local authority having jurisdiction or building codes insist on UL compliance, especially for grid tie connections, the Solis S6 will have a smoother path. If you're fully off-grid and operating in a location where certification isn't enforced, the Sandi may be an option. Who should choose which? Pick the Solis S6 if you need or want to grid tie and benefit from net metering or time of use billing. You want a UL-listed product that's likely to breeze through permits and inspections. You appreciate advanced monitoring and built-in battery charging. You have multiple roof orientations or shading and need those 4 MPPTs to optimize solar production. Pick the Sandi if you're purely off-grid in a remote area where UL certification and advanced features aren't mandatory. You want a proven low-frequency design and don't mind external battery chargers or MPPT controllers. You aren't planning future expansions with multiple rooftop arrays or different battery setups. Well, that's it for our deep dive on these two very different but equally fascinating inverters. I hope this series gives you confidence in choosing what suits you best. If you have any lingering questions, maybe about sizing, specific battery brands, or unique site conditions, go ahead and drop me a comment or shoot me a message. I love hearing about your solar adventures. Until next time, keep harnessing that sunshine, stay safe, and remember, a well-chosen inverter can make all the difference